Your microbiome is like the jet stream. When it's balanced, it keeps your entire immune system flowing smoothly. But when it shifts, when dysbiosis sets in, everything downstream changes. Today, we're diving into one of the most powerful forces in the perfect storm, the shifting winds of microbial imbalance. Hey everyone, Dr. Wada here, quadruple board certified allergy, immunology, lifestyle medicine physician, Sjogren's patient. I have been practicing for over 15 years helping people with complex immune conditions, and I deeply understand the journey of living with a body that often feels like a complex puzzle. This is episode 3 of the Perfect Storm series. So before we tackle today's topic, I want to make sure you have something practical to take with you. I've created a free toolkit, the Immune Confidence Storm Tracker, your 4R roadmap to recognizing your inflammation triggers and calming the storm. Simple self-assessment, takes about 10 minutes. You can find all the details in the description below. Now, this is episode 3. So in our last episode, we talked about the breached levee, how barrier breakdown in your gut, your skin, your sinuses allows bacterial products and other antigens to slip on through and to trigger systemic inflammation. But I ended with a question, which is what causes the levee to break in the first place? It's often the weather itself, the shifting winds of your microbiome. And today we're going to explore just that. What is dysbiosis? How does it drive chronic inflammation and autoimmunity? Why rebuilding microbial balance is critical in calming the storm. And if you've been told just to take a probiotic and you're wondering why that hasn't fixed everything, you're about to get some clarity. So if you've missed episodes 1 and 2, you can go back and check those out. And you're going to want to make sure to subscribe and hit the notifications bell because this is part 3. We got 2 more of this 5-part series. So what is the microbiome? Let's start with the basics. Your microbiome is the community of trillions with a T, of bacteria, fungi, viruses, other microorganisms that live in and on our body. In particular, our gut, we focus a lot of our energy on that, but they are found on our skin, in our respiratory tract, in our genital urinary tract. And these aren't just passengers. They are active participants in our health, to the point where we're actually considering that these might be a whole other organ system that frankly, I didn't learn about in medical school because we didn't know it was a thing when I graduated in 2010. A balanced microbiome helps us digest food, produces nutrients, protects our gut barrier. It trains and regulates our immune system. It produces neurotransmitters that affect our mood and our ability to think. It even influences our metabolism and our weight. I want to think of it like a rainforest ecosystem. When there is biodiversity, lots of species, all in balance, that whole system thrives. But when that ecosystem gets disrupted, things can spiral pretty quickly. And this disruption is often termed dysbiosis. So what causes dysbiosis? Well, there's some main culprits: antibiotics. Now, antibiotics, they are absolutely life-saving when you need them, but they are not selective in most cases, and they can oftentimes wipe out good bacteria along with the bad. And it can take several months or even years sometimes for that ecosystem to fully recover. This is why it's really important where if you have just a viral infection, we don't want to treat it with antibiotics, which are geared towards bacterial infections, right? So we shouldn't be jumping to using amoxicillin, augmentin, something along those lines, right? Or heaven forbid, something like ciprofloxacin for every little sniffle. Number 2, diet, particularly a diet low in fiber, looking at you carnivore folks, and high in ultra-processed foods, refined grains, sugar. Your beneficial bacteria feed on fiber. If you starve them, they die off. You also end up losing a lot of the protective mucus lining that helps insulate those areas we talked about last time. There's a single layer of cells in certain parts of our gut that are what holds our insides and keeps it apart from our outsides. When we have less beneficial species that thrive on sugar, and they multiply if we are eating diets that are rich in those ultra-processed foods, refined grains, which get quickly transformed into sugar and sugars. We also have chronic stress. Stress hormones directly affect gut bacteria. They alter the composition and they reduce diversity. Same thing happens when you have a crappy night of sleep. Infections, whether it's a bout of food poisoning, parasitic infection, though they're not as common as TikTokers would have you believe, acute gut infections can create lasting changes in your gut microbiome and actually your gut motility too. Medications beyond antibiotics, things like proton pump inhibitors, PPIs, NSAIDs, and even birth control can alter gut bacteria. So again, we have to just be thoughtful about our use of these medications. And sometimes the thoughtful thing to do is to take them, because that is what, is the best case scenario, is you kind of weigh the pros and cons. But again, we're trying to minimize using medications that, we might not need in certain instances, right? I remember when I started my training, folks who were on proton pump inhibitors, we just set it and forget it. And that's all we would do. And we've really come back and looked at our practice patterns and said, wait, that was not a great idea, right? So, but there are certain instances where, gosh, if you have a history of Barrett's or you have eosinophilic esophagitis, well, gosh, a proton pump inhibitor, that is probably a really great idea for you to be on one. And it's important to have these nuanced conversations with your personal physician and care team to make these decisions together. Now, many people's stories probably include several of these, or maybe even check all the boxes if you're A+ like me. Multiple rounds of antibiotics over the years, chronic stress, a diet that's more about convenience and deliciousness more than diversity. I don't know about you, it sounds familiar to me. We want to talk a little bit more, though, now about the mechanism. So this is where things, I think, get really interesting. But granted, I nerd out about this stuff. Let's talk about short-chain fatty acids. They're like the missing piece signal. When you eat fiber, your gut bacteria, especially the beneficial ones, they ferment it. And they produce compounds called short-chain fatty acids. The main ones are butyrate, acetate, and propionate. These short-chain fatty acids are critical. They're essentially the calm air that tells your immune system, we're good here. And here's what they do. First, they feed and strengthen your gut barrier. Butyrate is the preferred fuel for the cells lining your colon. It literally keeps those tight junctions we talked about in episode 2 strong and sealed. They also regulate your immune system. They are essential for the development and the function of regulatory T cells, or Tregs. This is what the Nobel Prize was on this year, talking about the role of Tregs in the immune system. And they are a critical part of autoimmunity. When we lose our Treg function, that's when the immune system goes haywire. Tregs are like the peacemakers for your immune system. They prevent autoimmunity by keeping other cells in check and making sure that we're not attacking our own tissues. And without enough of those short-chain fatty acids, your body struggles to maintain those Tregs. The immune response skews away from tolerance and towards pro-inflammatory pathways, the kind that can drive autoimmunity. Here's where things, though, get really vicious. When dysbiosis sets in, short-chain fatty acid production plummets, and inflammation increases. That inflammation damages your gut barrier. So we're back to those breached levees. And the barrier damage allows more bacterial products through and microplastics and undigested food and all those things, which trigger more immune activation. That immune activation further disrupts the microbiome. The winds amplify the storm. The storm damages the levees. The damaged levees amplify the winds, and you're caught in a feedback loop. Now, research has identified specific patterns of dysbiosis in different autoimmune conditions. For example, in rheumatoid arthritis, there's often an increase in bacteria like Prevotella copri and a decrease in beneficial species like Faecalbacterium pranitziae. In lupus, studies have shown reduced overall diversity in the microbiome and specific shifts that correlate with disease activity. In inflammatory bowel disease, things like Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, there's also a marked loss of bacteria that produce butyrate. Not super surprising, knowing that butyrate helps strengthen those tight junctions. And one of the key features of an inflammatory bowel disease is a visual breakdown. You can see it on a scope of that bowel lining. So these aren't just correlations. There's mechanistic evidence that these shifts are actively contributing to disease progression. Before we move on, I want to mention something important. The gut microbiome gets most of the attention, but you also have microbial communities in your mouth, on your skin, in your sinuses, your lungs, your genital urinary tract. For someone with Sjogren's disease specifically, the oral microbiome is hugely important. Sjogren's causes dry mouth, which disrupts the oral ecosystem. That disruption increases the risk of oral infections, contributes to the increased rise in dental decay and cavities, gum disease, gingivitis, and likely contributes to an increase in systemic inflammation. Similarly, people with eczema or chronic sinusitis, often we are able to see on culture samples and in the research that their microbiomes look different than people who don't have these chronic inflammatory conditions. So when we talk about reclaiming your microbial balance, which is the second R of the immune competent framework, we're thinking holistically. It's not just about gut health. It's about all of your microbial ecosystems together. So that brings us to reclaim, the second R of the immune competent framework. First R was recognize, which we talked about in the prior episode, but today we're talking about reclaiming your microbial balance. It's not just about taking a probiotic and calling it done, because the reality is that the data on probiotics is really not that great. Like, there's a little and we're learning more, but it's not a set it and forget it thing. We need to think about changing this entire weather pattern. So what does that look like? First, it's feeding your good bacteria. The foundation is dietary fiber, specifically diverse sources of fiber from whole plants. This may include fruits and veggies, of course, but also legumes, nuts, seeds, herbs, and spices. I often tell patients to aim for 30 different plant foods per week, not 30 servings, 30 different types. This isn't about perfection, though. We were talking about gradually increasing this variety. This is the goal. Sometimes we're starting way back at a different place, and we need to be thoughtful about this, because the reality is, for many of us who have eaten a fiber deficient diet for years and years, if we go from 0 to 90, we're going to be miserable, especially if you have slow transit due to something called gastroparesis. So this has to be done with a very thoughtful framework and, someone who understands how sometimes, too much of a good thing is not a good thing. 2, strategic use of prebiotics and probiotics. Probiotics can be helpful, especially in the short term, but they're most effective when combined with prebiotics. There's actually more data to support the use of prebiotics, so certain fibers that feed your own bacteria. So in my practice, I will often look to use certain specific strains that have some data for specific issues. Lactobacillus, bifidobacterium strains for barrier support, spore-based probiotics for more resistant colonization, or those folks that are more sensitive to probiotics, like those who might be dealing with mast cell disorders. Saccharomyces boulardii is also helpful for certain instances as well. This needs to be personalized, and what might work for one person may not work for another. And there is a bit of trial and error that goes along with this process as well. The other part that I think is really important is we need to remove the barriers to recovery. So we need to identify, recognize, and address ongoing factors that may prevent recovery. Are you still on medications that disrupt your microbiome? Let's just take a look. Are there things that you need to be on? Awesome. Are there things that maybe you've graduated from and we might be able to, take you off of? Is chronic stress still driving dysregulation? How's your sleep? Are there lingering infections like SIBO that need direct treatment? Sometimes we need to clear out the overgrowth before we can rebuild. I also talk about, trying to make forward progress on taking out some of those things in our diet that may be continuing to add to the breakdown. So trying to steer away from those ultra-processed foods that have a lot of emulsifiers and other things that break down the barrier. We want to replace vitamin deficiencies, like especially vitamin D, which when low contribute to leaky barrier. And lastly, we want to support this ecosystem holistically. It means managing stress. We're going to talk about more in the next episode. Ensuring adequate sleep, as I mentioned, getting regular movement that helps regulate our digestive motility, spending time in nature. Yeah, environmental microbial exposure does matter. And being out in nature is one of the few things we can do that actually improves natural killer cell function too. We want to avoid unnecessary antibiotics or use the most targeted antibiotics when we do need them. I know this can feel overwhelming, especially if you're already exhausted and you're doing your best to get through the day. But here's what I want you to hear and to know. Small shifts matter. You do not have to overhaul everything at once. Start with one thing. Add one new plant this week. Maybe it's a dash of cinnamon somewhere, or adding a new vegetable to your plate. You may try to take a 10-minute walk outside. You might try to look at your nighttime routine and think about how you might be able to adjust that to better support a restful night's sleep. We're looking for progress, not perfection. Now, before we wrap up, I need to point out something critical. We've talked about how antibiotics and diet disrupt the microbiome, but you know what else is a primary driver of dysbiosis? Chronic stress. And stress hormones directly alter your gut bacteria. They reduce diversity, they increase inflammation, they weaken your gut barrier. And this is the third force of the perfect storm, thunder and lightning. Because once your immune system and your nervous system get locked in that feedback loop, once you hear the thunder, or once you see the lightning, you're going to see the thunder. Ooh, got to get that right. Dysbiosis becomes even harder to resolve. And that's what we're going to unpack in our next episode, episode 4. So here's my question for you today. What is the one small daily habit that helps your inner ecosystem feel more balanced? Maybe it's a morning routine, a specific food, time in nature, or a way that you manage stress. Share it in the comments. I want to hear what's working from you, and we're going to learn from one another down in the comments below. And if you want to figure out whether your dysbiosis is a major driver in your storm, download the Immune Confidence Storm Tracker, your 4R roadmap to recognizing your inflammation triggers and calming the storm. This free self-assessment will help you identify which of the 4 forces need your attention most. The link is in the description below. If you're finding value in this series, please hit subscribe, turn on the notifications so you don't miss the next episode. Because in episode 4, we're diving into the thunder and the lightning, the neuroimmune chaos that keeps the storm spinning. It's going to be intense, but I promise it's going to give you so much clarity. If you've watched these 3 episodes about the perfect storm, the breached levee, the shifting winds, thunder and lightning, and you've thought, yes, this is me, we're meeting live for Reclaim, Rebel, and Rise, the vision workshop for bold women who are ready to step out of survival mode and into possibility. And I am going to be completely honest with you. If you're on the fence about joining, this is your sign. This is exactly what I'm experiencing. If you've been feeling stuck in a cycle of inflammation, exhaustion, and that sense that your life is getting smaller and smaller, and if you're tired of just managing symptoms and you're ready to actually expand your life again, the workshop is for you. Here's what I know about the women I work with. You're capable. You're so intelligent and you've achieved incredible things in your life. But somewhere along the way, chronic illness made you forget what it feels like to have agency, to have a vision that excites you, to believe that your body could actually support the life you want to live. Tomorrow, we're reclaiming that. The workshop starts at the time below. We have all your time zones there. We'll spend 90 minutes together, and I promise you it will be 90 minutes that shift something in you. You'll walk away with clarity of what you're releasing from 2025, a bold vision for 2026 that feels both exciting and grounded, a personalized vision map you can reference all year long, and one courageous next step that you can take immediately. And look, I know December is chaotic. I know you're busy. I know you're tired, but that's exactly why you need this. Because if you do not create space to pause, to reflect, and envision what you actually want, you'll just end up defaulting into another year of the same patterns. Registration is still open, but just barely. We're limiting attendance to keep this an intimate event. It's free for Immune Confident Institute members, $26 for everyone else, which you can apply to future purchases at the practice. The link is in the description below. Register right now. Let's make 2026 the year that everything shifts. And grab your storm tracker if you haven't already. Until then, see ya.